Hello and welcome back to the Future of Retail Marketing Conference from the Retail Bulletin. If you were with us for session one this morning, thank you so much for coming back to see us. This is our second session of the day, optimizing customer acquisition in a cookieless world through digital analytics. How's that for a big title? But I have a guest here with me today that hopefully will be unpacking this. This is a cozy session today, just the two of us, one-to-one. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce Chris. He's the CEO and founder of QueryClick. QueryClick is also the headline sponsor for this webinar and has been supporting the Retail Bulletin in bringing this event to fruition today. So thank you so much for that. Before I introduce Chris, can I just remind you, audience, to get involved? We have a Q&A button all for you. Please do use it. Depending on what device you're using, it'll be somewhere on your screen. I'll keep an eye on that and do ensure that you get your questions over to Chris or even myself. I'm happy to answer a question as well. But yeah, do get involved. It's for you to be interactive with us as well. My dog is in the background somewhere. For those of you that are used to my dog making appearances, she's been very quiet this morning. She's right behind me at the moment, fast asleep. So she may or may not make an appearance, but I know some of you have asked where's Scamp in previous webinars. So she's asleep right behind me here. Who knows whether she decides to join us or not. So without further ado, Chris, hello, welcome, and for joining us today. Thank you so much. Introduce yourself first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. It's great to be here. So I'm Chris Liversidge. I'm the founder and CEO at a company called QueryClick. So we were founded 13 years ago now, I think, in 2008 anyway. I suppose we can all do the maths. And really, QueryClick is focused on giving performance marketing optimization to enterprise customers. Previous to that, I was working initially with web developments. I used to build people websites. Bring those websites to them on floppy disks, if you remember those, because they didn't have the internet into their office in those days. And after that, I ended up working and building the search marketing team for what became the largest independent search marketing agency in the world. That was then acquired by Publicis, and I founded QueryClick the next day, more or less. And also over the last 7 years, we've been heavily involved in developing technology to help our customers, and more recently also to help customers of other agencies get the right data into their own hands to do marketing optimization, pretty much. So that's us, that's who we are, that's who I am.
What was the big idea, Chris, in 2008? Take me back. So you said, you virtually started it the next day from leaving your previous job. Yeah. What was the moment or the big idea that led you to start the business?
Well, I could see that, I think at that point, I felt like I had a very good grounding in performance optimization. I think at one point in my career, I'd had 60 customers that I was directly responsible for the search optimization performance of, for example. So it was a real crucible to learn what actually moves the needle. And I really wanted to take a fairly simple approach, which was just to combine that product with best-in-class customer service and really try to develop long-term customer relationships, ensure that we were always delivering value, and build a sustainable business that fundamentally exists to help its customers thrive and succeed in performance marketing. And we've been successful in that. We actually have a customer today who joined us in that first year. We were the sole supplier to the largest telecoms group in the UK for search optimization, that sort of thing. So it's proven out that, I guess, if you can try and understand what you're offering and combine that with really great customer service, then that there is a demand for that. And
tell me about the name. Did the name just was an obvious choice, or was it something you'd had in your mind already?
Yeah, it was. There is a story behind it, and there was a slight hungover note, certainly, to that name being created. But the idea was to drive optimization, not just through channels like search and paid media, but through to conversion and look at optimizing that whole funnel. So from the initial query through to the final converting click. So that was the idea, which at that point wasn't really talked about much. Cast your mind back to 2008. They were very siloed disciplines, the idea of converting the traffic that you were capturing often totally different teams, even internally, managing that. So it was just focusing in on what is the business trying to achieve with this traffic, and making sure that you never are too far away from that. And that helps you ensure you're getting relevant traffic, and it informs things like the terms you bid on, the ad creative, etc. So really taking a view across that whole conversion path, which is not too different, to be honest, to kind of our concerns today.
Yeah, it feels quite visionary of you in 2008, because as I said, it was kind of ahead of the curve in terms of the name itself and what you were trying to unpack with that.
Yeah, I'd say so. We had a CRO department, and I remember that wasn't a thing. And conversion rate optimization now obviously is a whole industry. So yeah, for sure, I think it was a bit more forward looking, but I could see that that's what, businesses wanted, and they still want today. I mean, there's certainly a trend towards in-housing and using more specialist support, so that, all optimization efforts can be closer to the customers that people are trying to attract. So, I think that is that's borne out by kind of customer demand, and that's what's driven the industry where it is today, where there's quite good vertical integration sometimes across marketing strategies.
It's funny hearing the words floppy disks mentioned, because it reminds me this, they were the height of absolute tech ones, weren't they? So yeah,
that's right.
I remember being a store manager at Radio Rentals. Do you remember that brand?
I do, yeah.
This is obviously late 80s, 90s, and we had to like save all of our store data onto this floppy disk and then send it off on a data bag to head office once a week.
Yeah.
And it was all, very high tech, for someone that in their early days of store management, that was the cutting edge of what we were doing. So when did we stop using floppy disks? It feels like forever ago.
Yeah, it's probably around the time that mini disks came and went. That's the other technology that I still miss.
It's nice to have a trip down memory lane anyway.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's kick off with some discussion, but thank you for that. And thanks for joining us, and also for the background on QueryClick. Let's talking about cookies then. So this cookieless world that we've talked about in the title of our chat today. There's a lot of discussion about third-party cookies for obvious reasons. And how do all cookies, including first-party ones, influence marketing measurement and performance? Because some people find the whole subject bewildering.
Yeah, I mean, it relates to what we've just been talking about, really. The idea of thinking about the customer when you're performing optimization. The cookie as a technology was there right at the very start of web measurement. And, I've been involved in this long enough to have seen all the different various iterations of web analytics packages. There was a time where you would have, 20 or 30 or so different viable applications you might use to try and do measurement. The vast majority of them use, a bit of JavaScript on the website and then a pixel and a cookie. And today, GA, Google Analytics and Adobe, which between them are 98% of the analytics market, they use that same technology. And I think what's interesting about the cookie discussion, third-party cookies, is it's bringing this very sort of venerable old bit of technology under scrutiny, because a cookie is really just a text file. It's served to try and provide a kind of persistent state for a session and have that state be passed through the pixel back to the servers on the web analytics side. And actually, there's been almost no scrutiny as to its effectiveness. I mentioned that we've sort of been on a journey over the last sort of 7, 8 years on the technology side to try and get better data into our customers' hands. We actually did that initially on request of Tesco, so the largest retailer by revenue in the UK, and also B&Q, big homeware retailer, and a couple of other of our customers. And they were asking us to look at how store footfall was being affected by digital activity that was under our control. And we really started scrutinizing the web analytics side of things at that point. And quite quickly, it became apparent that first-party cookies, so cookies served by your web analytics to enable your tracking, just were not functional. They weren't effective. I mean, to give you a picture of how ineffective they are, when you consider that the web analytics package is trying to tell you, here's a visit with multiple hits from an individual, it's only getting that right about 20% of the time. So the vast majority of our data that we use every day in our web analytics data is 80% wrong. Wow. Because it's presenting a picture of an individual, and that just simply is not the case. As soon as you scratch the surface, you can see that is simply not accurate. And I think that's one of the things about today's dialogue around third-party cookies, which are trying to provide the same function just on a different website. And the recognition that actually that ecosystem is not providing good quality data. I mean, there's obviously the privacy side of the discussion, and I think that's right, and fair, and everyone should be allowed to opt in or out as they so choose regarding their preferences. But that's not actually functionally being supported by third-party cookies properly either, because they are so ineffective at identifying, oh, is this the same individual? So I think it's interesting, and I think in terms of how cookies influence marketing measurement and performance, I think they are fundamental to our understanding of performance today. And unfortunately, our understanding of performance today is, broadly speaking, broken and incorrect. We're heavily involved in the attribution side of things because of that. If the cookie worked, attribution would have been solved a decade ago when it was first talked about. Whereas today, for the vast majority of people, and we partnered with Census-wide to do a number of surveys, it's still a key problem, a key unresolved problem in the marketing measurement stack. So I think cookies are fundamental to measurement, and unfortunately, they are fundamentally broken as well. And they really need to be replaced with technology that does work.
And is there for anyone watching today, is there an easy fix to that or not?
Well, easy, it depends on your definition of easy. I mean, we've spent
maybe a wrong term to use.
We spent 7 years trying to get an answer to that is scalable and accurate, and we did succeed in doing that. We ended up using a combination of machine learning and AI. So there is an easy solution, which is to move away from existing web analytics techniques, which is a pixel and a cookie. That's called a kind of deterministic approach. It's when you're looking for an ID to be passed, and then you're associating data with that ID. Instead of looking for that ID, you can use machine learning and AI to use a probabilistic approach, where it doesn't need an ID. It just looks at the characteristics of the data and says the probability that these engagements here are a continuation of those engagements there is over 98%. So I'm going to join them together and assume they are the same ID. And then I'm going to test if that's true or not by seeing if it's predictive and looking at yesterday and seeing if it predicts today, kind of like weather forecasting modeling works. And that process completely, fantastically replaces the promise of the cookie and is effective. It also has a range of other benefits. It means that you can look across different data silos very easily. So you can look into your Facebook activity or your Google Ads activity, which is itself in a silo. It's a different pixel, it's a different cookie. It can look across all of that activity and join it together coherently and in a measurable way. So yes, there is an easy solution, and we've come across one ourselves after internally looking at this problem for quite a long period of time and putting a lot of money and investment behind that. But that's something that now that effort has been delivered is, I would argue, a fairly cheap, fairly easy solution that can be implemented. And 30 days after making the switch into these methods, you've got accurate data, you've got attribution supplied as part of that package over and above it. So yeah, there is a simple solution today. I think now is also a good time to be looking at that, because for most of us, our marketing stack is under scrutiny because of the impending removal of third-party cookies and that whole side of marketing activity being removed from our control. So yeah, there is a short answer. there is a quick and easy way to do it. You're welcome. It took us a while to get there, but we've done
quick and easy that took you 7 years to find out. So thank you for doing all the hard work on that. The sun is beating through my window just on that point as well. So good to see the sun out. Before I carry on, when a consumer opens a website and they get that message, accept all cookies, does the consumer really know what they're accepting or not?
Yeah, your speculation is as good as mine. There's certainly a few studies about that. I would say that there is a huge amount of cookie blindness. You know, most of us are familiar with the idea of banner blindness, the idea that you become to recognize patterns very quickly and almost filter them out of your conscious thought. So that idea that a banner, an ad isn't actually necessarily seen if you're seeing that format regularly. I think the same is true with cookie acceptance. I mean, I don't know about you, but I certainly used to spend a bit of time looking at options and then basically just accept all or reject all.
No, I don't. I just kind of cookie accept all because I kind of just want to get on with what I'm on the site for.
That's right.
You know?
And I think also there is a component of that is misleading in itself, because when you are involved in placing ads on behalf of customers, I can tell you there aren't any customers that are saying, oh, I'm desperately wanting to access data so I can somehow do anything nefarious. What they are all wanting to do is find some relevant audiences that they can target and make relevant statements to. So I think the idea that the obligation to understand that is the purpose of many of these cookies, and that and that's packaged in with a whole bunch of other cookies for other purposes, that's too complex a decision to be pushing around every website you visit.
If we drill down on third-party cookies, what is it particularly about them that impacts attribution and measurement?
Yeah, so I think third-party cookies are interesting because there's a couple of reasons. So they have the same issue that first party has, which is they sort of represent a reality in data that isn't true or accurate. So at the moment, they're used to kind of pass over information to the advertiser, or at least the bidder acting on behalf of the advertiser, that an individual is part of a particular cohort that they want to target. Now, actually, we know that that's not accurate. There was a really well publicized at the time, peer-reviewed scientific study published in 2009. So that was a paper on the effectiveness of third-party consumer profiling generally. Newman, Tucker, and Whitfield were the authors of that. And there's a lot of really interesting insight in there, but the main one that should stand out for advertisers, and which kind of tells you the lie that third-party cookies offer, is that to get any incrementality at all from an ad, from your third-party data that you're paying for to try and make it better targeted, to get anything that actually makes that ad convert better, you need to pay 2.5 times the cost of the ad itself for a display ad, and 1.5 times the cost for a video ad. So what that's telling you is it is only the very, very premium inventory that has actually any effect on your ad's effectiveness. Now that's partly down to the fact that the targeting is being passed through to the bidder by a cookie. So there is very, very poor technology underpinning that activity in the first place. And I think the second part of that is that premium inventory means that you are investing in a relationship with a publisher that's of higher value, and then typically, therefore, you're getting better engagement from that publisher. Now, that is best managed as a peer-to-peer relationship with a private network deal. Putting those kind of activities in place and working directly with publishers is a significantly more effective way to get incremental value from your ad targeting. So, for me, the third-party cookie has long been, quite a lazy way to sort of simulate the idea that customers are targeting the right audience, when the reality is, unless you're paying an enormous amount for very premium inventory, you're not getting the value for money that you thought you were. And that's a scientific study. In 2019, we knew that. We're still aware of that today. It's part of the reason why cookies are being phased out in the first place. And again, just to come back to it, it's the same reason why first-party cookies aren't affected. So the scrutiny today is on third-party and how we're going to replace that in our measurement system. But I would argue that the scrutiny should be on replacement of all cookies. And the major use of cookies that we all have is in our first-party measurement. It's in our web analytics data. It's in our Google Analytics and our Adobe Analytics.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure the audience listening will be compelled by some of that insight. Don't forget, please, audience, if you do want to ask Chris any questions around this subject, on all these subjects so far, please do use the Q&A button and I'll make sure that you're heard. Chris, Facebook. There was the update iOS 14.5, I think we're on now or something, in the latest update. And so since then, there's a limited audience available on Facebook. Can marketeers still drive value from that platform, and where should they focus their time and budget instead?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we all knew that Facebook would lose inventory when that change was made. So the IDFA, the opt-in process that iOS users go through, it's very similar to a cookie process. Do you want to opt in or not? Most people say no. And so what that's meant is that the available audience or addressable audience volumes have changed. And we've seen across our customers at QueryClick that almost 2/3 of that addressable audience has gone in many instances. And so you can work that out if you have enough volume going through your Facebook campaigns, because Facebook is one of the most effective, if not the most affected ecosystems by that change by Apple. And that's not a coincidence, I'm sure. But that means that you have less addressable inventory for each ad. And so it's an auction-based system. If you have less available inventory, your costs are going to go up. And social itself is an interesting one. You know, I can still remember 5 years ago, you know, trialing things on Facebook was much more common. Today, you know, you can see, I think there's a recent IAB study that showed that certainly in the UK, about 98% on average of all digital media spend is either in a Facebook property or a Google property. So that includes things like Instagram and YouTube. But you get the point that Facebook is not, you know, a 10% of media spend these days. Quite frequently, it is 50%. 60%, we've seen 80–90% of media spend. And so if your cost per acquisitions are going up dramatically in your main media channel or half your media channel, then you do have a significant challenge. And I think to the second part of that question, what can you do about it? Well, what you have to do about it is bring attribution to the party. Because I guess the other concern that people have with Facebook is it's, again, another measurement system. It has its own attribution method. If you look at, and we have an interesting client case study on this, if you look at the difference in revenue reported by Facebook and revenue reported by your web analytics system, you'll see a significant difference. So Facebook over-reporting quite significantly. And that's because they're trying to value an impression that didn't drive an immediate click. And so their attribution model is saying, sure, you didn't see these clicks, they came through somewhere else, but we're claiming credit for that because they saw an advert based on what we think from what we see in our system that we're not going to let you see. And so that revenue that they're claiming has to come from somewhere else that you're collecting data from and you're having revenue reported into. So it's cannibalistic. And without an attribution solution that lets you de-silo that, lets you take the Facebook data and remove their assumptions and correctly attribute it based on the data that you can pull directly from Facebook's API, you're in a tough position because you can't optimize effectively. Now, where we have done that, and we've deployed that using AI solutions, again, replacing the cookie, we found that for one particular retailer in the UK, Quiz Retail, they've got large volumes of revenues. They're AIM listed, fairly major retailer. They had about 68% less revenue than Facebook was reporting. And we have seen very similar figures for other deployments with other customers, particularly in the retail space. So if you're talking about taking 68% of revenue away from Facebook and allocating it correctly elsewhere, and you're talking about Facebook's cost per acquisitions going up, you don't have good control over attribution. You have no way to make that an effective marketing channel for yourself this year, and certainly not next year, where this is just going to get worse with the loss of third-party cookies.
So to people listening then, coming back to the cookie chat, what alternatives to cookies should marketers be considering? I lost you, Chris.
Oh, hello. I'm here. I don't know
That's
how much
all
of
right.
that you heard.
That's you froze on us just for a second. Yeah. So
Okay.
Did you hear the question?
I didn't know. Please fire it through again.
Just going back to the cookies, in terms of, to our audience listening now, what alternatives to cookies should marketers that may be listening to us now be considering?
Yeah. So I think that goes back to this idea of using predictive rather than deterministic approaches. So, we spent 7 years on this, but really it doesn't. Today, you can use machine learning models that create greater than 95% accuracy in joining together multiple hits. We actually have a global patent on doing that component, if you like, of the mix. So that bit of technology to power data collection. That's quite a significant patent, obviously, to hold, and it's something that I guess is the payoff for the investment we've made. But once you have done that, you are then able to apply all sorts of different approaches to attribution and get really good results. We've found that you can take different modeling approaches, get really interesting, powerful insights from that. So the simple answer is machine learning, which is really pattern recognition and understanding what's going on and being predictive and being validated in your accuracy by being predictive, is super robust technology. It's what machine learning was kind of born to do. It understands the data much better than we could, much better than rules-based approaches, and it gives you a solid sort of map, an entity map for all the individuals that are engaging with your data wherever they are. And that then allows you to do really good, effective things like attribution measurement.
So if we picture ourselves in this cookieless world then, Chris, yeah?
Yeah.
What type of attribution model would you recommend in that cookieless world?
Yeah, so I think there's a range of interesting options here. We used to, for a long time, use something called an ensemble model approach, which is where you have a different attribution model for different channel engagements, and you then integrate those models by having another model look at them. So why you would do that is because people who interact with, for example, affiliates, to give a fairly simple example, quite often affiliates are, they're publicizing collateral towards people who are very value focused and who are typically quite close to the end of the conversion funnel. And often will do that even where those people have already been through quite a comprehensive buying cycle, and then they will always go and check for affiliate codes at the end. So the way you treat that journey should not be the same as the way you treat a journey that doesn't touch affiliates, let's say, but does engage heavily with, say, brand generic or brand search terms earlier in the funnel, then come in on generics later and don't touch affiliates. So we found the best predictive accuracy came from essentially using this ensemble approach, where you have slightly different models and methods for different channels. And we used that for a number of years. Today, we now have, we actually have an AI-led approach, which outperforms the accuracy of that. That's probably a little bit more elite. It's something that we have built into our Corvidae platform, which is our basically packaged together solution that just does all this stuff for you. You don't need to think about it. And in that AI model, we're using something called long short-term memory, LSTM, which is just a type of neural network learning, and commonly you would just refer to that as AI. And really that model is looking across the entirety of all data that's presented to it, and it's weighting every single interaction and the probability that the interaction had some influence on its conversion. And so essentially it is scoring on an attributed basis everything that any individual engages with. And that means that you have very, very granular data. And then at that stage, really at that stage, we can hand off and do kind of allow people to do custom work off the top end. They can do standard aggregated reports or things like that. But at that point, you've got really good, accurate attribution, and it should be fairly weighting every different kind of engagement, whether that's a Facebook impression that didn't drive an immediate click, but subsequently someone came through who had been influenced by that impression. It can capture that subtlety. It can even go into integrating your offline activity. And the purpose of all of that really is just to give marketers day-to-day accurate reporting that isn't biased by broken cookie data and ultimately isn't sort of driving you towards all your activity being at the end of the funnel, being where the auctions are most aggressive, most expensive. And instead you can kind of much more cost effectively target the top of funnel and genuinely see the influence that that's having very quickly in your revenue for your customer or for yourself if you're the advertiser.
Thanks,
so yeah,
Chris.
AI is the short answer.
Okay, I got it. A comment in from Alison. Thank you, Alison, saying she has to dash actually, but this has been so interesting. So she's asking us to share the recording of the webinar with her. Alison, we've got your email address. We'll make sure you get a copy. Thank you very much for those nice comments. Chris, other than the removal of cookies, if you're a retailer or a marketeer listening to this today, what should be your advice, future looking, about what they should be concerned about next year and beyond? Yeah,
I think if I make the assumption that there is some accuracy in their measurement, I think there's a couple of opportunities. So next year, I think you'll see the strides made by digital TV continue. So we got a study a couple of weeks ago came out by Advanced TV. It was looking at the sort of saturation of digital TV in different markets. In the US in August, digital TV was present in 45% of all households. Now, previously that has been 20%, 15%. So the fact that it has jumped so much, I mean, partly driven by lockdown, of course, but there are changed behaviors that look to be more stable, where people are now much more willing and able and more frequently exposed to programmatic TV buys. So whether that be through over the top or just through things like YouTube being presented and used in the living room. So it's now possible for us to expand our reach and act like proper full stack marketers with measurement, accurate measurement across all of that. And we can get into households, the vast majority of households these days, through all of those digital activities. And to give you an idea of the benefit of that, it's about half the price on a CPM basis to have a digital TV ad in a household compared to a linear TV, a traditional TV ad. So if you're slashing your CPM in half, and you're able to measure that and measure its influence on people's conversion, if that's how you're running your optimization next year, you're going to have a dramatic advantage over the competition. So I think next year, the biggest thing is to embrace, moving away from cookies in measurement systems, moving away from partial attribution solutions, and just embracing something that looks across it all and taking advantage of those digital channels, because they are highly effective and there are new channels that we can really optimize and get great value from.
Thank you, sir. We've got another question in, actually. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. It's Mail or Mile. how would you target lookalike customers without third-party cookies? For example, when you said predicted rather than determined.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we all have to get on top of our first-party data. Now, when you're doing prospecting, you would, if you're using third-party cookies, you'd be looking at lookalike modeling to try and get good results. My recommendation is that actually what we should be doing there is developing our first-party data as much as humanly possible and taking learnings from that to try and identify the premium publisher inventory that we should be looking to build direct publisher relationships with, so that we can place advertising directly, so private marketplace deals. Powering that, the insights on where you're going to do that, and almost taking a whitelisting approach is much more performant than any other approach, especially when you come back and consider that inventory without that spending 2.5 times the cost of the display ad is the only inventory that's actually form. That tells you that you need a two-stage approach. You need a spray and pray approach where there isn't any targeting, and really you should be doing that with your premium inventory. And then you need subsequent targeting, which is more tailored, and you've collected first-party data, perhaps nurture campaigns, and adapting your strategy in that way. That is absolutely the best way to get performance.
Thank you. Time has zoomed by. We've been talking for almost 40 minutes, so thank you so much for such compelling content. I'm going to come to you for some sort of final words, if I may summarize. By the way, the audience member just says thank you for the answer to that question as well.
My pleasure.
Thank you for posing the question. Summarize for us then. So the benefits for the removal of cookies, summarize for our audience.
Yeah, so we've seen with case studies on our side that if you move to a cookie-free measurement system using either Corvidae or an equivalent system, you can look at and reallocate your media spend and get significant return on ad spend. So for example, we have a study showing with a mattress retailer, direct to consumer retailer, one of the largest ones in the UK. They were getting 35-to-1 ROAS on reallocated Facebook activity. And then also with that quiz retailer, 20-to-1 ROAS on reallocated paid search activity. So if you think about the fact that for many of us in digital, that's 95% of our spend or so that can now be reallocated to those levels of return on ad spend. I think that's the clear-cut benefit. And for me, that's the way that if you're finding it challenging to get traction with your business, to look at measurement and attribution and getting a clear view of what the truth really is about marketing performance, then you can quickly deploy changes into those two channels very easily. As I say, 30 days time, you'd be up and running. And that gets buy-in because you'll see that you're getting overall increased revenues for your media spend. And then you can start adopting measurement across all the different areas of activity that we have in the wider ecosystem.
Thank you. So, I mean, this subject, it can be bewildering for some people to get their heads around. And I think you've managed to bring all the subject matter to life in a way that's clearly engaged with our audience. They've stayed with us. So thank you so much for that. It's always a good measure.
My pleasure.
And even the audience member that left us told us she was leaving and asked for a recording. So a particularly good sign, but thank you so much to you, Chris, for that incredible insight and content, and to QueryClick again for sponsoring today's event. That's it for the pre-lunchtime session, I guess we'll call it. We're back at 2 o'clock with a panel interview, a panel today, not an interview, a panelist, and it's personalizing the customer experience. Buyers wanting personalized interaction. So will be a great panel line up there, and that's at 2 o'clock. If you can't join us for the rest of the day, do bear in mind on the 28th of September, we have a Future of the High Street webinar from the Retail Bulletin, and details of that will follow shortly as well. But for now, Chris, thank you to you and to QueryClick again, and I wish you all a lovely lunchtime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, everyone.